Alright guys, it's time. It's the eve of the Premier League season starting and I've got to do my predictions. Why am I doing this to myself? So I can give you lots of nice material to troll me with and ridicule me with in the coming months and the end of the season, wherever that might be. To laugh at whatever I've predicted, whatever I thought's going to happen and whatever. But look, it's a bit of fun. Everyone's doing it, and it also allows me to just give you guys a little bit of a thought very briefly on kind of all the teams and how I think they're going to do this season. And we'll be doing this video slightly differently. I'm going to talk you through it now, but let me know in the comment section what you're predicting for your top four, your champions, who's going to get relegated, all that. You let me know. But yeah, enough talking. Let's get into it. Okay, so I just mentioned in that intro that I'm going to do it slightly differently. Why? Because I'm an absolute coward. I'm not going to be putting teams directly with a particular position. I'm going to put them roughly in positions. What do I mean? Let's show you here on this very amateurishly put together. It looks like a tier list, doesn't it? I mean, it's not a tier list. It kind of looks like one, but it's not meant to be. Anyway, you get my point. I think you can have a good guess at what you think teams might do without, pinning them to necessarily a position. If you say, for example, that Arsenal are going to get in the top four, but actually they get fifth, you're not massively wrong in terms of what kind of season they're going to have. So I wanted to kind of group certain areas and positions together. So let's get straight into it, starting with the bottom and the relegated teams. I'm going to give a word on each. First team. And by the way, there's no particular order, so I want to put Bournemouth in, but that doesn't mean I think they're finishing 20th, nor because on the left does it mean that I think they're finishing 18th. But I do think Bournemouth are going down. Sorry, Bournemouth and Bournemouth fans. I quite like Bournemouth. I really enjoyed them when they were in the Premier League under Eddie Howe in particular. I thought they played really good football. I thought they were exciting, had some good players. But I think they're going to want to go punch for punch with teams in the league this season. That's how they did it when they were there before. That's how Scott Parker was when he had Fulham in the Premier League, how they are under Scott Parker and Bournemouth and how that works. I don't know if it's slightly different now. But yeah, I just think Bournemouth ultimately will want to go punch for punch and won't have the firepower to stay up. The next team, I'm sorry, Fulham. I do think they're going to go down. Look, Fulham are slightly different. I think they've got a top goalkeeper in Bernd Leno. What a signing he is and will be. I think Alexander Mitrovic might be a difference maker and might finally start scoring. So there's every chance Fulham have the necessary, I think the necessary quality at both ends of the pitch to stay up and make a really good go of it. But I just have a feeling that they will go back down again. Will they have done enough? And a lot of this is actually based on what I think of the other teams around them. So I will touch on them in a minute when I talk about the 15th to 17th places. But yeah, again, similar to Bournemouth, Marco Silva, he'll want to go punch for punch, he'll want to press. And I just have a feeling that they might not have enough in terms of I think they'll entertain. But will they have enough? I'm not sure. I don't think they will. And then the other team going down, and again, it kind of falls into the same category. I've put Leeds in there. It's kind of a similar thing. Again, I think they'll want to entertain, but will they have enough? I'm not sure. And I just think I wasn't overly convinced by Leeds under Jesse Marsch last season. I think a lot of it was adrenaline and everything just kind of getting them through. I don't want to take from what Jesse Marsch did, which ultimately was a good job to keep them up with the trajectory that they had. A lot of people thought they were going to go down, but I just don't. I don't think they're going to have enough this season. They've now lost Calvin Phillips and Rafinha, two big players, and they're very, very difficult to replace. So those are my three to go down: Bournemouth, Fulham, and Leeds. But who will be in that fight with them and just about stay up? I'm going to go for Nottingham Forest. Now, this is probably the team I know the least about, I'll be really honest. I'm not going to say too much other than I went to see Forest against Arsenal in the FA Cup. I was up there and they were fantastic. Now, I know they don't have James Garner and Jed Spence, who were two players that made a real difference. Do they have Davis, who I know was on loan from Villa? I'm not sure. He led the line, I think, in that game. But they've brought in Jesse Lingard and they're doing some other good business. I think Forest will just about have enough because I think they'll be very tactically astute. I think they'll be very, what they've done since their manager, whose name I've forgotten, anyway, since he came in last season, the turnaround after that poor start and what they've done, to then get into the playoffs and win them and get into the Premier League is absolutely fantastic. And watching that Arsenal game, listen, they weren't just parking the bus and trying to get through it with a 1-0 win. They were really, really good and caused Arsenal loads of problems that day. And I think that they'll actually have enough, what with their manager and some of the players they've got, to I think be a bit of a surprise and stay up. Other team that I think will be in that fight with them, I'm going to go Rav Hasenhüttl, Southampton. Now, I don't think Hasenhüttl will actually make it to the end of the season. I like him as a manager, and I've got a lot of respect for what Southampton do in terms of, since really coming into the Premier League, the appointments they've made, the signings they've made. I've got a lot of respect for what they do, you know, the academy players that come through. But I just have this feeling with Southampton that it's going to go a little stale now. I think the fans are maybe getting a little bit like, you know, we're ready for something different under Hasenhüttl, and I feel like we will see that change made this season. And I think that will be off. I think that will be generally sparked by the fact that there'll be a relegation battle, though. I think we'll always kind of have enough just to stay up. Now, who's in that relegation battle with them? For me, it's Brentford. Might be a surprise to some that I've left other teams out, but Brentford for me, I think Christian Eriksen made a massive difference to them last season. I know they started the season, the 21-22 season, well. I know too well because they beat Arsenal. But then it kind of started to go a little off. In comes Christian Eriksen. Some much needed quality added to that midfield. Got the best out of players around and got the best out of Ivan Toney as well. But I think I just think without him, and it's so hard to replace a player like Christian Eriksen. I just have this feeling that they'll be okay, but struggle for a lot of the season. I know they made some good signings, but yeah, I'm tipping Brentford to be in a relegation fight, but ultimately have enough to stay up. And I think that'll largely be down to Thomas Frank, what a good manager he is. I do think he'll make it through the season, and then get another third Premier League season with Brentford after it all. Right, 11th to 14th. Now this is interesting because who am I thinking is really quite clear of the relegation scrap, but actually might be knocking on the door for top 10, will be that kind of, these are the teams that I look at and you think, you never want to go away from home to these sides. It's always difficult. It's always awkward. They'll take points off the big boys. And this is where I'm going to start with Everton. I'll put Everton in there. Because while I think I've been quite kind not including them in either, you know, basically in a relegation battle, I think they might kind of finish 13th, 14th, and I think they'll have enough. I think, you know, they've added the likes of, Gay's come back. They've got, who's that? James Tarkowski, who's come through. And I think under Frank Lampard, who a lot of people are tipping to have be one of the first managers to potentially, be out of a job, as the season goes on. And also they're just basically tipping him to really struggle at Everton. I actually think they'll do some business, and I think they'll get some decent players in. And I think over 38 games, Lampard will show himself to be a good coach that will get them playing good football. I'm actually pretty confident about that. So I think Everton will finish, in the top half of that second half, in the third quarter, if that makes sense. So who's joining them? I've got to pick three other teams. Let's go with Wolves. The reason I've gone for Wolves is I think last season they surprised a lot of teams. They didn't make the best start, but then they go on a great run. I think the turnaround was that derby against Villa, where I think they were 2-0 down, won it 3-2. And they started to go on a really good run, and come February, March, I was, as an Arsenal fan, starting to look at their results, thinking, let's hope they're not challenging for a place in the Champions League. And in those two games Arsenal did beat them in, wow, was it difficult. It was really tough to get through in those games against Wolves. So I have a feeling that Wolves will still be a good side. Molineux will always be a difficult place to go, but they won't be as good as last season, in my opinion. They've lost a couple players. Trincao, I don't think's there anymore. So, I think Wolves will be good, but not as good as last year. Joining them, I'm going to go Brighton. I'm going to go for Brighton because I like what they're doing under Potter. I really do. They've lost Basuma, but I think they've got other players, the likes of Mwepu, the likes of, who is it? Caicedo, who's a very good player. I know they all play slightly different roles, but I think Brighton will have enough quality. But again, they finished in the top 10 last year. I'm not sure that they'll be quite as good as last season. But also, a lot of this is not really about Wolves and Brighton not being as good as last season. I think teams that maybe underperformed last season will get back to it, and I'll explain what I mean by that when we come to the 8th to 10th places. Who else is going to join Brighton, Wolves and Everton? I'm going to go for Crystal Palace. Now, Palace is a really difficult one, okay, because would it surprise me if Palace finish in 8th place, or maybe even challenge for a spot in the Europa or Conference League? No, wouldn't. I think they've got some really, really good players. I really, really like Eze. I like Zaha. I like Elise. I like Mateta. I even like Schlupp. I think he's quite a good player. I like Anderson and Gehi at the back. Patrick Vieira, an Arsenal man. So look, it wouldn't surprise me if Palace do well. I'm rooting for them to do well after this Friday. Very much after that, from Saturday, I'm rooting for Palace to do well. But I just have this feeling that what with not having a perfect pre-season, Conor Gallagher being a real engine in their midfield, I know they've added Decore, but I just have this feeling that Palace will be good and will probably finish 11th out of those 4 sides I've mentioned, but I don't think they'll have quite enough for the top 10. Would it surprise me if they are in the top 10? Absolutely not. They've got some terrific players. 8th to 10th now. Okay, so really, we're looking at Villa, Leicester, Newcastle, West Ham. Now, they might feel a certain way. Leicester were finishing 5th back-to-back only a couple of years ago. West Ham have added a top striker after really, they should have finished 6th last year, if we're being honest. I think they were better than Man United for a lot of last season and had bigger moments. But let's put Villa in that 8th to 10th for now. I think under Gerrard, I think under Gerrard, they will improve. I think they made some good signings. They did the business early. And I think they'll have had a full pre-season to get ready. I think they'll be okay. I actually think Villa will be a pretty good side this year. And Villa Park will be an awkward place to go to for most sides. Newcastle. I think they're being very smart with the way they're operating since the big cash injections come in. I think they're just trying to. Well, first thing was about confirming their Premier League status. Just getting players that were going to be up for the fight and make sure that they're in the Premier League this year. They did that at a canter easily. In the end, but are they adding the kind of players that I think are now going to start knocking the doors on the Big 6, if you want to call them that, or the top 7 or 8. I think maybe 8th to 10th place is what we can hope for from Newcastle. But look, they're going for James Maddison. If they get James Maddison, maybe another, I might certainly start to change my mind. If Callum Wilson's fit for a full season, I might certainly change my mind. But I just have a feeling that across 38 games, Newcastle won't quite have enough to do better than 8th. But I think they'll be improved again under Eddie Howe this year. But again, I might change my mind if they are to bring in players like James Maddison and a few others. So who's going to join them? Now, I've got to be honest, I'm looking at West Ham and Leicester. If fans of those sides have an issue with that, absolutely fair enough. I've got a controversial take here, and I'm really sorry to all Hammers, but I think West Ham are looking at 8th to 10th place. I know they added Skamaka. I know they added Agerd at the back as well. I know that they'll probably add 1 or 2 more. I just have this feeling, and it's actually less about West Ham. I just have this feeling that West Ham, the last 2 campaigns were so good for them. The improvement in the league, in the one behind closed doors, and then people thought, well, that's it. They've got European football. The crowd's about. They won't be as good. No, they built on that. I thought they were very good for a lot of last season, beating Liverpool, Chelsea, giving City a great game at their ground as well, going 2-0 up, and the Europa League run, but I just have a feeling that all this might have taken its toll on West Ham a little bit. They need to refresh it up front and add some quality in the likes of Skamaka and some depth for Antonio. But yeah, I just have this feeling that they won't quite be as good. I think they'll be a good side. I just have a feeling they won't be quite as good. But I do think they'll win the Conference League. I actually do think that. So listen, would you take that, West Ham fans? 8th in a Conference League win back in the Europa. It's European silverware. That's what I'm thinking for West Ham. And I'm thinking Palace could easily be ahead of, a few of those teams that I've mentioned in that 8th to 10th bracket. So I think it's going to be so interesting to see how this all kind of plays out from that 8th to 14th place. I think there's quite a few teams that could end up anywhere there. But apologies, West Ham. And I will say that it's not just about West Ham, who I think, again, will be a good team. It's not quite as good. It's also about Leicester for me. Now, let me put them in that Europa and Conference section. I think Leicester will get back at it. I think Leicester under Brendan Rodgers will get their act together again. Last year, I don't think they knew how to quite balance the Europa League and the new signings and the disappointment of missing out on the Champions League 2 years in a row before, Fofana getting injured. I think there was a lot of setbacks there for Leicester. But Harvey Barnes, Maddison, Tielemans, they've got some really talented players. Vardy back, who obviously was injured for quite a bit of last season. I think Samare settling in, Daka. Now, if they're to lose Tielemans or Maddison, I don't think they'll lose both. I think they'll keep Fofana as well. Then, they're going to replace them. And the recruitment's always been very, very good. And I think with the focus being on the Premier League, we saw how that benefited Arsenal last year. I think Leicester are going to surprise teams and they're going to get into that Conference League space. But what I'm going to do, while I said that the order doesn't matter for all the other brackets, and I stand by that, I'm just going to shift Leicester to the right here because I know how people will read it, and I just have a feeling that it's going to be Conference League. I don't think they'll have more than the teams that I'm backing to get into the Europa League. Now let's go for my champions. I'm going to jump all the way there, and I'm going to put Man City. I think they're going to win it. I think with City, it's a case of I think the top two, and I might as well put Liverpool there as that first team in the top four. I think with Liverpool and City, I think they've lost some key players. Sterling, Jesus, Zinchenko, Mane as well for Liverpool. I actually think their levels are going to drop on the previous years. The sheer levels that they have maintained over 3-4 years is unbelievable. But I just think that we're going to see that tail off a little bit with the changes that they've implemented. The new style in that they're getting more sort of physical number nines, classic number nines, if you will, leading the line. And I just think we're going to see a different dynamic from City and Liverpool. I think this is Man City 3.0 under Pep Guardiola, and I think Mane is going to be a big miss for Liverpool. So while I think they'll fight it out, I do think City will get over the line, but I don't think these guys are going to be hitting 93, 94 points like they did, in previous years. I think this could be decided around 88, 87 points. And I actually think that the top four challengers will close that gap a little bit. So, yeah, that's my prediction for them. But I'm still expecting those two to dominate and be the best two sides in the league this season. Who else are we going for? Now, so I've got to complete the top four and go for those Europa League spots. Okay. Don't hate me, Arsenal fans. Please don't hate me. I think Tottenham will get third. I think they'll see this as their big opportunity under Antonio Conte. I don't think Spurs fans will even mind me saying that. Antonio Conte taking the Spurs job was a surprise to me and to many others because I always felt like he was destined for clubs that he could go in, make a few tweaks and be challenging for titles. Spurs need a little bit more than that, as we've seen from the business they've done. A lot of business that they have done this summer, but I think it's good business, and I think they'll run through a brick wall for him, and I think they'll do whatever they got to do, these Spurs players this season, because they know that Antonio Conte doesn't tend to hang around very long, and I think they'll give it their all, and I think actually for a lot of the season they'll keep pace with the top two, but maybe tail off as they begin to tire, maybe post-World Cup, can they get back up to speed? I don't know, but that's what I'm sort of expecting from Tottenham, but I do think that Arsenal will be right on their tail, and listen, Arsenal could easily finish above Tottenham. It wouldn't surprise me. I think last season there were a lot of moments where Arsenal showed that when they were at their best, they had everyone fit. They were as good, if not better, than Tottenham, in my opinion. But, Arsenal didn't have the squad depth, and I think the firepower in Son and Kane was obviously a big part in the end that really got them over the line, Spurs getting in that fourth place. But I think both teams will get top four this season. And I think Arsenal, I have this feeling / hope, and a lot of it's hope, that it might just suddenly come together for Arteta. What with the new signings, what with added depth in certain key areas, and I think there'll be one more to come. These younger players, a year older, so yeah, I'm backing Arsenal to get into the top four. Maybe a little bit biased, maybe a little bit of hope there. So why do I think it's Man United and Chelsea for the Europa League? Well, let's start with United, which I think is just the easiest to explain. I don't think United fans will mind me too much saying this. I think United will improve massively under Ten Hag. I think he's going to be that appointment they got right. Mourinho, I thought it'd go better than it did, but it didn't. Solskjaer was always going to be a disaster in my opinion. I guess it wasn't a disaster, to be fair, but it ended badly. I think United will improve this season under Ten Hag. I think that gap between sort of 3rd to 7th or maybe 4th to 7th is going to be a lot closer. So I think United and Chelsea will find themselves in a top 4 race for most of this season. But I think ultimately they've not had the most ideal preparation. I think flying them out to Australia, and then were they in Oslo, and then they had a game straight after the game in Oslo, and they've been, they've been in Bangkok as well before Australia. They've been all over the place, Man United. They couldn't get De Jong over the line. The Ronaldo thing still is hanging over them, and I think will definitely, if he stays, will it hang over them? Well, I don't, even if he goes, then how do you replace him? I just think this Ronaldo thing is going to be a constant, around Man United until they really, truly get it sorted. And that means him coming out saying he's staying or going, and then getting that right replacement. I just think they're going to have a few problems this season that are really out of Ten Hag's control. What can you really do about Cristiano Ronaldo and his desire to leave, and if there are no buyers and all that? I think he's got to try and integrate him somehow, and he probably will. But I just think that's just going to be unnecessary distraction for United. So I expect them to finish 6th. Chelsea. Now, Chelsea are my hot tip to fall out the top 4, because I don't think the trajectory for Chelsea has actually been great for a good 7-8 months now. Now, I know everything's been happening away from the football, everything that has been going on in the world that has affected Chelsea. And listen, you can't deny that would have played a part. But at the same time, they started last season so well and fell off so much. I think it kind of went under the radar, actually, how bad their form was in the second half of last season. And it was almost so bad to the point that they kind of got caught up in the top 4 scrap they're kind of on the brink of it, when they should have been clear of Tottenham and Arsenal, having made the start they did. And the fact that they got dragged into it just shows how bad their second half of the season was. Now, in fairness, should have beaten Real Madrid and progressed in the Champions League, got to 2 domestic finals as well. I'm not writing off Tuchel or a lot of these Chelsea players. I know they've got quality. I just feel like with Todd Bowley coming in, it's been a very scattergun approach in the transfer market. I'm not sure they truly know what they want to do. I made a video saying, will Chelsea move to a back 4 now that they've got Sterling? And I put my argument together why. And actually, they tried it against Arsenal and it didn't look right. So are they going to keep signing players that will aid that, or is he going to revert to a back 3? Like he did in the second half of that game against Arsenal, Tuchel. And it does seem to be the system that Tuchel prefers. Well, I say prefers. Again, watch the video. I made this whole argument on why I think, Tuchel does actually prefer a back 4. But maybe for this Chelsea side and what they've got, he's just going to have to stick to a back 3. I think Rudiger's a big miss as well, and they've not got that striker in to replace Romelu Lukaku. Who are they banking on to score the goals? I know Sterling will contribute, Havertz will contribute, Mount will contribute, but who's their kind of main man leading the line? I think that lack of security up top might cost them, and we saw it with Arsenal last season with Aubameyang. Then what happened? Lacazette. Then what happened? And then Nketiah being quite young as well and only getting his kind of real first minutes in the Premier League as a regular. You saw Arsenal just didn't quite have enough to get over the line, despite playing good football and actually looking quite good for it at one point. So those are my predictions, guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I mean, look, there are a few I'm not really sure about, but that's the beauty of doing this, isn't it? That's the fun. That's what you guys can kind of look up and have a laugh about in a couple months' time, or whenever it might be. That's what I think the Premier League is going to look like next season. Again, let me know in the comments. We'll round it off there. A big thanks. Catch you on the next one.